It's Rolly Worsfold here. It's a Thursday afternoon. I believe it's January the 8th, and 2015. We're into the new year. I'm doing a project for the museum, the Rossland Museum and Discovery Center, and I'm happy to be here with Dave and Doreen Butler. So let's go back a long way, Dave and Doreen. I mean, I know you ended up in Rossland, but one's from Tasmania and one's from England. How did that happen? What's the story about Tasmania? And give me some background.
I found him under a bar. Were you under it? Or... No, go for it, Dave.
It goes back to England, and I'm in there trying to do some engineering study and also racing motorbikes at the time. But I think the most important part of my life there was ending up at a place called the White Bear Inn, which was where Doreen's mother ran this place. It was a free house, a free English public house way out in the country where a lot of these motorcycle types collected Saturday and Sunday, and when they could during the week, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. And when they could afford it, they would drink rum and blackcurrant and various types of ales. And every now and again, of course, one of us would fall on the ground and Doreen would come around and pick them up. And I guess I fell more than most people, and she picked me up more than most people. So that's the meeting.
What year would that have been?
Ooh.
59?
Yeah. Late 50s. 58,
Yeah.
59.
Now, did you end up in England because of motorcycle racing?
No, really, more engineering.
More engineering.
Because I did most of my schoolwork was done in England during the war, and discovered that if you tried to duplicate that or to go on further in a tertiary manner in Australia, it didn't jibe. The English education system and Australian education didn't jibe. It maybe doesn't even now, I don't know. But I had to continue in England to get somewhere in engineering. So basically that's what the motorcycle racing was fun.
Mm-hmm. I bet.
Just like the visiting the White Bear was fun.
So were you a biker chick?
Well, I did try riding a motorbike, but I didn't know how to stop it. So I made my way to a very large hedge because I figured that I would be one side or the other of the hedge. And I was the other side of the hedge, and the motorbike was swinging in the leaves. But yeah, in those days you didn't have helmets like there is now. And I had a pigskin bag, a rather nice leather bag, and I used to wear that on my head to keep my cells in, just in case I missed a corner or two or whatever. So yeah, I was a biker chick.
Oh, okay, good. Good to hear that. And so you guys started courting, and you finished your school.
Yep.
Yep.
And back to Australia.
Back to Australia.
And then Doreen came on 6 months later.
You sent me some money to get an engagement ring.
Oh yeah, what was
and it was
$12?
It was still tight then, right? Nothing's changed. And I went to the pawnbrokers and came home when I was 21.
21?
Just 21, and said, I'm engaged. And they said, who to? I said, that guy I used to go out with from Australia. And of course the family all had a conniption and screamed and yelled, you all hated out there the black men and big spiders. So does that give you a little bit of background of what I was up against?
Yeah, that sure does. Now, so when you went back to Australia, that would have been 19...
It was late 50s.
Late 50s?
Yeah.
It was probably 59.
And you had your engineering degree?
I didn't have a degree, but I was qualified.
Oh, you were qualified,
Yeah.
so then you started working in Australia?
Well, yeah, a lot of work.
Yeah.
And we lived with my mum and dad in Melbourne and two brothers.
Yeah, well,
And quite a crowded house, actually.
Can
girlfriend.
I interject?
She
here?
sure can.
You went ahead, you went back to Australia and sent money for this engagement ring. We've gone into that, but I didn't tell anybody that I was leaving, possibly, and I wasn't even sure how close David and I were, a new relationship, 12,000 miles away from home, but not to disappoint myself or David, I decided I'd give it a go. And the farmer next door got a packing case for me, put it in one of the stables, and I kept putting things in the packing case. And then I applied to Australia House to get enough brownie points to become a 10-pound pom, as they called them, with an assisted passage. And then, cutting a long story short, I got to Australia where David's mum and dad met me, and Dave.
All right.
And got thoroughly spoiled because they had 3 boys and I was the first girl.
Okay. So now you're in Australia.
Yep.
We're still a long ways from Rossland. And
Well, I'll cut that. I'll try and cut this a bit short now.
Yes, yeah.
At that time, you couldn't find apartments or flats or anything like that in Melbourne, even though I had a job and Doreen had a job too, but you couldn't find anywhere for us to live, to go and live as a married couple. We got married, but we couldn't find anywhere to live. But I was offered a job in Tasmania that had a house with it. So off we go to Tasmania, which is the island state, obviously, below Australia.
Oh.
And we go down there, and all we had was a little sports car, little Austin Healey Sprite, packed all our belongings in it. I think it was in a box about this big, all our belongings. And so we arrived in Tasmania, and we stayed there for 4 years, and both Tracy and Greg were born there. And to get from Tasmania, it's a great place to live. We thoroughly enjoyed it. But we experienced an Australian feeling at the time, and it's one of isolation. Australia is isolated from the rest of the Western world, although it's a Western world country, if you like. And Tasmania is even isolated from Australia.
yeah.
So you get this impression that unless you go and do a bit of travelling quick, and we had 2 young kids, that was a problem. You're never going to do it once the kids are 9, 10, 12, 15, 20,
Yeah.
too late.
The roots are
So
in.
Yeah.
we did some inquiries and went through immigration things to Canada, and actually ended up, did we actually emigrate? I'm not sure whether we emigrated or whether we just had landed immigrant cards.
It was a Commonwealth
Yeah, it was a
umbrella
relationship
in those days, yeah.
between Australia and Canada. So we came over with the 2 kids, or rather, I went on ahead by boat. No planes in those days.
That's how
I
came
went on
over.
by boat
Yeah.
and found a place in Melbourne and managed to get a job very easily. So
No, hang on, you said Melbourne, you mean
sorry,
in
Vancouver.
Canada,
Vancouver,
Vancouver,
yeah.
yeah.
And then, so that would have been 68?
No,
No, earlier than that.
We're probably 64.
64.
We were only 4 years in Tasmania, a couple of years in Melbourne, and then it was 64,
Okay,
something
so
like that.
Beatlemania.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then from Vancouver, we're still thinking we're going back to Australia. We hadn't become Canadian citizens by any means then. We thought we were going to go back. In fact, I think we even had a booking on a temporary booking on a boat back. But then I got a job offer in Colorado, and at that time we got into skiing. This funny thing called skiing. I learned to ski on Mount Seymour in Vancouver. Doreen did likewise. Got the job in Colorado, so we moved to Colorado with the 2 kids. And then San Francisco, and was then that Mum and Dad died in Australia. And now the glue that was going to take us back was a bit severed, so
It was a lot severed.
back to Vancouver for, well, I guess maybe 4 years, something like that.
Yeah.
So we're into close to 70s now.
Yeah.
And then
You were still skiing all during those years too.
Yeah.
I was learning to ski. We were never ski bums in the true aspect. We were weekend skiers, you know, working, trying to keep bread and water going. And I guess I, for one, got fed up with Vancouver, rain, dark, miserable winters, and the skiing wasn't really great. And I think we had a couple of trips up to Big White, Silver Star, and we suddenly, well, we didn't suddenly, it gelled over 3 or 4 years, was let's try something on our own, and we don't want to be here. Where can we find property that we can afford and try and build a ski lodge or take over a ski lodge or something? That's the introduction to Rossland, which is actually, I'm dominating this, I'm sorry, but
This isn't. This, by the way, is not unusual.
we had a person called Joe Sibley who lived with us as a student. He was at UBC, and he was in our basement upstairs, and he said to us one day, why don't you come into the interior and look at places like Kimberley and stuff like that? My dad still lives in Trail, you should come past us. So we came in and had a look around. Of course, we couldn't afford Whistler prices or Manning Park or anything like that. But we came here and Joe said, well, why don't you go up to Red Mountain? What's Red Mountain? Well, we've got a ski area up at a place called Rossland here. You do? Never heard of it. So Joe brings us up, drives up the whole road from Trail to Rossland, and we looked at this and wow, there's even some land.
There was a big sign out there.
Yes.
It was
Can we afford this? That started
6.4 acres.
And that would have been in 1971?
No, it would have been 72 or
72,
3.
okay, so yeah, okay.
Probably 3.
Okay.
And so we started a negotiation with Mr. Hindle, who was the mayor of Kelowna. He was one of the owners. And Corky Price, Cole Price, was one of his partners. Okay.
Okay.
And
There was another person in there, Buchanan.
Buck Buchanan. Not quite
sounds
sure
like a
where he
cowboy
came in.
name.
Yes.
But these people, there was 4 or 5 of them, owned this property. And actually it was a larger piece of property that ran right up beside Granite Lift. You know, and that new road that was run in
Right.
front of the shutter, that divided the property. So that the bit that we were interested in was 4, 5, 6 acres, but there was the larger piece of property that they still owned, I think,
Yes.
running right up the mountain.
We
That's a story.
We bought 4.5 acres.
Yeah.
And funny,
me.
today I was walking down the golf course with the mutt, as we called him, and people have been out with their snowshoes, and we decided if we'd put an offer in, and they had accepted. This is rather jumping ahead a bit. But we came up in the winter to see the property in the winter time, and rented some snowshoes from the skis.
John Schick gave us a pair of his snowshoes and
Yes.
somebody else.
All right.
Yeah. German.
No, the Avalanche guy from
Bruce.
with 2 hips. Used to look after the pass.
Oh,
John Tweedy.
John Tweedy, yeah.
With the 2 hips.
I think it was John Tweedy's snowshoes and
John
Schick's snowshoes.
Okay, yeah.
We met Gary Camosi.
Oh yes, we met Gary.
Anyway, that's beside the point. Before I was interrupted, we borrowed these snowshoes and went out onto the land. And as I said, this morning I'm looking down at where I was going to step out there in the snow and thinking, there you are, somebody's put down a nice big flat snowshoe. I'm going to aim for that. And then memories came back of renting this equipment and then going out onto the land and falling over on the snowshoes.
First time
And
on
this-
snowshoes.
Oh yeah.
And the snow was so deep that I couldn't get up because I didn't have poles. I just had
Couldn't
this.
get purchased. Yeah.
Couldn't get purchased, so I had to sit there and bang my feet around and take one off and bang the snow
No,
so that I
pat
could
the
make a
snow.
landing pad and stand up. And that was my first introduction
To
to
snow
what
in
I
Rossland.
call real snow. Yes,
And so that would have been the first winter, 73.
before we ever
74
started.
might have been, but
Yeah, 74.
Yeah.
So the new red chair was up too. Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
and Greg and I went skiing, and I was just absolutely staggered at the size of granite.
Yeah.
You know, it was one of those days where the cloud was down about Tower 10,
Like
and
today.
I thought,
Yeah.
this is a big ski area, and then suddenly we went through the cloud, and we had the papoose bowl, and there. Good God! Look, there's more.
More.
I can remember looking down from the top of Red, thinking, I'll never make it. I know I won't be able to turn there. No, I couldn't possibly. I'm going to die. But of course I didn't.
And the property is on the base. Is on the base of red.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So that was.
So John Schick and John Tweedy, and you started meeting a few locals.
Oh yeah. Well, we met Fred, of course.
course.
Talked to him, and we spent a lot of time with Bud Muffley, who was school teacher in the area, and he was a skier at the time. Not a very good skier, but he charged around everywhere he wanted to go without much turning. And but he was a good guy. In taught me how to get logs for the fire, and lent us all sorts of equipment to keep going. And people like Richie Mann and Audrey were just
Yeah.
fantastic
What can
to
you
us.
say? Yeah.
Yeah. And we realised that, yes, we'd come up here to try and do something for ourselves, but we'd come to a community that was something we had never experienced before. We're basically city people up until then. And suddenly we realised, I think, well, not suddenly, it dawned on us, this is a tremendous community. And that thought hasn't changed ever. In fact, it's gotten more so
Yeah,
over
isn't
the
it?
years.
Yeah.
Interesting how that happens.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
In this town.
Particularly in our case, we were from the cities. And you know,
But then so many people that we have known all the time that we have been here originated from big cities,
Yeah, that's right.
other countries.
Yeah, that's right.
And the bond is tremendous. When somebody wishes you a happy Christmas, it's deep and
Yeah.
caring.
Yeah, yeah.
I got one little incident. I have a very good friend, Al Fisher, who, when we lived in Vancouver, I used to do a lot of running,
Oh, that's
and
right.
I would meet Al. He's a much better runner than I ever was, but I would meet him running around UBC endowment lands, and in the mornings, I worked at Wright's Engineers, he worked at Simon's Engineers. We would catch the bus from West Point Grey in the rain, in the dark, to downtown Vancouver, and we'd sit on the bus and chat about running and skiing and whatever. And then one day I said to him, well, Al, this is the last time I'm going to be on the bus with you. I leave on Friday and we're going up into the interior to try our luck up there. Oh yeah, what are you going to do? So I said, well, we're going to try and build a ski lodge in a little ski area up in the interior. And, oh really? Where's that? Because I'm from the interior and I used to do a lot of skiing, you know. Now I don't do much here in Vancouver, although I go up to Whistler and ski. So I thought, oh yeah, well, you'll never know it, Al. Well, tell me. It's in the Kootenays. It's a place called Red Mountain at Rossland. And Al turns to me and looks at me and says, I was born in Rossland. What?
You feel very
That's a great story.
insignificant then. You
That's
go,
right.
"Oh,
And he was
God."
one of the first young men in Rossland to get a scholarship. And that's when the boy, Bill
Yes.
Stevens and him and all some
Yeah.
of those guys, we were the first
He
'cause
may
the
have
collegiate
been
skiing-
the first.
He was
wasn't
the first, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other one he would have been his big buddy.
Mary? There is
Well, yes, he
Yeah.
was one,
Yeah.
but the fellow who lives in Pinewood, Gord.
Gord
Hi,
Lloyd.
Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Danny. Can we
And
follow you
I
back?
think they all went
you at
down
home?
to University of Washington.
You were a poor skier, is that what you said?
Well, when I came from, I'd really only learned to ski in Mount Seymour and Mount Baker and places like that. Weekend skier. And when we came here, I still wasn't a brilliant skier, although I started, skiing as hard as I could, like a lot of people do. But I was fairly late then. It was late 30s, 40s. And Dave Smith, who was the cross-country ski guru,
The guide.
who was in
Guide,
had a shop in the Ram's Head Inn basement. Dave said, right, we've got to go touring, you and I. What's touring? And of course, touring equipment isn't as good then as it is now.
right, I can
Anyway,
remember.
Dave had 2 or 3 sets of touring stuff,
Reamers.
and we go up to the top of Granite, and then we tour across, which we all know now, onto Grey, and then down the other side of Grey, and then up Kirkup, and we're standing above the boulder field, and I'm thinking, this is a world I've never even understood. This is incredible. And then we skied down into the boulder fields, and it was incredible for me.
I bet it was.
Beautiful snow. I don't know how deep it was. And into the bushes down below, and then of course we get to the parking lot and we've left the car there. And I thought it was the most incredible experience that I'd had, and I didn't even know before that touring like that existed.
Yeah.
So I've got to thank,
Who would have thought it would have
Dave.
caught on like it has now?
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
amongst a lot of us, yeah.
Well, I
And,
think interjecting, when we had the lodge and the cross country, well, we didn't run the cross country shop, David Smith and
I worked in there
yourself,
myself.
yeah.
Yes.
Remember?
And somebody would get lost.
Rescue, search and rescue.
You were
Yeah.
in the ready to go.
Yep, I was part
And
of that
there was-
group too. Yeah.
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 Simon.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and the Scottish girl who was on
Yeah,
patrol.
Meg. Meg.
Oh, Meg. Okay,
Yes, yeah. And
then-
John used to say she kept you warm because she was rather a big, strong girl.
Yeah. And
And
then-
when you were out there trying to search for people and you had to huddle together to keep warm, and I think I had made a batch of brownies or something one time, and I was really concerned that you had food because you were going out and it was dark, and John, I can remember, came back and didn't say how the people were or that you'd found them or anything. Oh boy, they were the best brownies I've had in my whole
I think they were
life.
the right brownies.
you nailed the brownies.
Yeah, Meg was good.
Yeah.
She was
So
very
when
good.
when you built the Ram's Head, there was what other accommodation at the base of the mountain was? There was the
Red Mountain Motel, with some A-frames.
Yeah.
It was just 4 A-frames?
Four
No,
A-frames.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
A dining room,
Yeah.
and there was, I think he was Polish,
Yeah.
the cook.
Steve?
Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah.
And he used to make warm food.
I remember Steve. And then there was the
Shutter.
the red shutter.
That's
Yeah,
it.
and
that was it.
they actually had a gas pump at the motel then.
That's right.
That's right. I remember that. Yeah.
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 And when we came to build, I'm sort of jumping from one thing to another here, the Ram's Head, Richie and Audrey gave us the A-frame to live in, and we had a tent trailer. And in the cabin there was a 3-legged belly stove, and the fourth leg had to be 3 bricks to hold the stove up. And when we were getting food, I can remember having a pork chop on the end of a fork, a long fork that you'd use to put a moose leg on the end of or something to cook on the flames inside of this belly stove.
Oh yeah, there was no cooking. It
And
was
we slept on the floor,
yeah.
and the kids had upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
And when we slept at night, we had a collie dog at that time too. The mice used to run over the top of us to take a dog biscuit and then run back over us again to get the dog biscuit out the hole in the wall by the back door.
So your transition from urban to rural
Urban.
Oh yeah, it was.
Was like bang.
band. But you had a lot of support from the Rossland community.
Oh,
Tremendous.
And
fantastic.
you had quite the crew building the,
Oh
the
yes,
ram set.
we had Lloyd Henderson and Dennis Herons
Yeah, herons. Yeah.
and Mike Krafchek, and all three of them still live in Rossland. I hope they're all friends, but I'm not too sure about that. But we are still friends
Yes.
with all
They
of
were
them,
fantastic to
and
us.
they were a fantastic crew. And
were.
if without them, the Ram Set Inn would not have been built. We were terribly naive, and we shouldn't have done it, but we did. So there you go.
And-
But without their help, it wouldn't have been.
Yeah.
We ran out. We ran out of money in the end,
Yeah.
and they stuck with us so that we could open.
Yeah. And that was, when you opened, it became, in the view of all the people that lived around, the greatest place on earth.
Our first guests were the Southern Ontario ski team.
In late January.
Oh,
And that would have been 70...
75, 76
76,
season, I
yeah,
think,
yeah.
yeah.
And it wasn't a good snow season. It was a poor one,
That wasn't, it was the one after, we had one bad one in there when they built the
Yeah.
Paradise Chair.
John Coburn.
Oh, that was a couple of years later.
Later, yeah. So there was a few bad ones.
sorry. John Coburn was coaching then, Bruce Coburn's brother.
Oh.
He's a doctor now.
And he was coaching the...
He was coaching the Southern Ontario
Well, there's,
team
yeah. Wow, I didn't realize that.
with
Okay.
Steve Poborski and
Well, actually, the girl, I can't remember, who crashed on the downhill run,
Here.
and banged her hand up, and I had to cut the couple of rings she had on her fingers. I had to cut them out off with a hacksaw, and she ended
Not
up
the
World
fingers.
Cup winner. I can't think of her name.
Kathy Kreiner?
No,
No.
before Kathy Kreiner.
Okay. Sorensen?
But-
No, that would have been way after.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I remember when the whole team used to stay at the Canadian team at the A-frames too.
yes,
And I used to go
yeah.
there and I used to buy a pair of skis off Dave Irwin every year. And
Oh,
That's
yeah.
I
right.
still remember those hats and sit around with the guys, and they were always a very amiable group.
Yeah.
Oh, they were
Yeah.
good. They were the A-frames. And there's an interesting one there. Is they had showers in each A-frame, but the shower head. If you ever saw them, they were 1 foot above the bath. So you had to lay in the bath to get a shower. Whoever put the shower head at 1 foot
Close.
above
It never became a Kootenai thing.
They were quite primitive, those.
Well, that's why having the ram set was a great step up.
Yeah.
for
Well,
most
even the shutter was a
Well,
great
yeah.
step up.
I
Yeah.
remember staying in the shutter in the early years too, quite a bit. Now, you guys were running the red shutter, or sorry, the ram set. You were raising a family, and you started to ski a lot too.
Oh, yeah. Well, started to ski a lot, but then suddenly the financial position hit, and I realised I had to go back to work. Luckily, I could get a job at Kaminko. Tech was Kaminko then. And so I went back to work down there in engineering for 9 years just to pay the mortgage. And Doreen ran...
which was very high then,
Yeah, it was-
12.4%.
yeah,
Yes,
interest
during
rates
the
were
80s. I
ridiculous.
remember that.
Yes.
I bought my first real estate in the early 80s. Yeah.
It's
78
hard.
all through to 82.
Hard.
Yeah.
it was a tough time.
It was tough.
It was a tough time.
It
Yeah.
was, but they were good times because we were getting into the Rossland community, and you've got to think the people who helped us out, like Phil Johnson. He helped us out so many times, and we're just so many people that
And Fred?
we had really great parties,
Yes.
as we well know. And it was a lot of fun. And yes, I tried to ski as much as possible, you know. Both kids got involved with Red Mountain races, and that started that circus up. But it was a good one. And of course we had a lot of friends with the ski club, mostly the manager, Fred Bosinger, who was just superb with us. But I will tell you one thing.
That's good.
In the parking lot, there was a band of trees on the bank between the lower parking lot, which was much smaller than what it is now, and this large bunch of trees that you had to walk through from the Ram's Head to the base lodge actually screened the lodge from the Ram's Head. You could not see the lodge, right? And we had the assistant manager then,
Lawn.
Lorne
McDermott.
McDermott,
Yeah.
one day decided to cut all these trees down and make this into one large parking lot. And I don't know, we took total exception to this. So I went over to have a row with Fred. We'd had several rows before, but
Really?
we were very good friends. We just had a lot of rows. And over various different things, ticket pricing and God knows what else. But this particular night was Halloween night. So Fred is dressed as...
Hunchback of Notre Dame.
And I'm dressed as a pirate.
Oh, yes.
And we start our
Mountain dance.
argument in the bar about 8 o'clock at night. I had my wooden sword, and I was gonna fix Fred with my wooden sword.
Weapon.
And you got to remember, Fred is a good 6-8 inches taller than me, and probably gives him another 80 pounds. You know, he would have killed me. But we had this argument up there, and Fred's wife, Margaret and Doreen, sat by whatever they were dressed in, and they just laughed at the pair of us. Of course, we'd had too much to drink to stuff.
These Halloween parties were quite memorable.
Oh, they were. They were incredible.
We were all very fortunate to go through that whole period with what we called sometimes Fred Mountain.
Yes.
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 Yes. I think there was myself and a couple of people that
Yes.
crawled on the roof.
Put the F in front of Fred.
Yeah, that's right. It was Bobby Sawyer, myself, and Jim Spence. And,
Yes.
And Fred, when he was here for the reunion, we actually gave him a framed picture
Yes,
of that with
that's
him up
right.
on the roof.
Yeah.
That's right.
He took it all. We thought it would be down in the morning, and Fred was proud of it. And I think it stayed up top for about a month.
Oh,
Yeah, he was
easily.
proud of
Yes.
it. Yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
He knew what everybody thought of him. He was a bombastic, very dictatorial guy, but he was great.
He ran
a great ship, didn't he?
It was a wonderful time to be involved with the mountain and
Yep.
ski as much as we all did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you guys in Rossland, you raised your family. It's been great to see you guys so active in the community. Dave, we see you out biking still all the time. You're a mentor to all of us, as Doreen is. And was it partly because of Rossland? Would that happen if you would have stayed in the city? Would it be
No.
as easy to?
As I said to Doreen, I would have liked to have gone into a computer and said, at the time we made the choice to come here, I would love to have had that scenario. What would have happened if we'd have stayed and tried to survive in Vancouver? I don't want to even think about it, because this was the choice we made, and it's the best choice I ever made in my life. Doreen will say probably marrying me was the best choice. Right?
To have a town where your children love it so much that they don't have to leave.
That's right.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, they went away for a couple of years.
We
But they're
came
back.
here by sort of a wing and a prayer, you could say. And I just would like to mention that many of us had a friend, Dan, who I'm not going to go into a lot of specifics, but he died of AIDS in the 80s. And Dan is somebody I met at the laundromat when I came to town, because we certainly didn't have anywhere to do any washing at that time. And when, at first, because I'm going back into the 80s, AIDS was a big bad word. And there are a lot of people in town who were very scared. Fortunately for me, I had a rotten disease and was over it, but I did understand how those people felt, because it was like, we talk about Ebola now, Ebola, it was that sort of scenario. But eventually the town showed us what they were really about.
I remember that.
They would come and read as Dan lost his sight. They would help finish his house.
Oh, yeah.
Music.
20
They
of
would
us.
take food, their music.
Yes, I remember, yes.
Everybody, well, it wasn't everybody, obviously, but many, many people took turns. And they never shirked.
No, yeah.
And when he died, the town church was busting its seams with people. And because Dan was obviously gay, but he didn't project that in any manner, but he always looked smart. Nobody had dowdy things on. Everybody had something bright and cheerful and loving to give. And that, you can't buy that.
No, it makes you
You
realize
can
you're
never
living in the
buy that.
right town, and I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of us that have that memory of that time, looking around a room and going, I'm sure glad I'm with these people.
Yes,
There was
absolutely.
there was
Yeah.
Chicken skin.
one
Yeah.
character there was Gail Dickinson, Dr. Gail Dickinson, who was lady at the time, about our ages, and she knew Dan well, and she was one of the doctors who had something to do with him during his bad years there with AIDS. And when she came to the church, Gail was dressed up in the most outlandish outfit you could think of. To say she looked like a lady of the night is kind of an exaggeration, but she said, you know what? This is what Dan would have wanted,
It's
me
true.
to look like this.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, and there's me putting a black tie on or something like that.
No.
That
we,
wasn't the image.
No.
we wore hats,
Yeah.
both of us. We
I
wore
remember Dan in his cowboy
hats.
hat.
Yeah.
Dancing
Yeah.
and dancing and loving dancing.
Yeah.
Now, before we stop here, because these are the stories we want to hear. Somebody moving into town, is it the right place to be? Is there any other advice you could give somebody in town?
I think you have to be an outgoing person. I think you've got to be, another sports medicine doctor, a friend of ours from Vancouver, said, I've never come to a town where so many people are so active. You come in the summer, they're running, riding bikes, mountain bikes, they're walking dogs, they're doing everything active. You come in the winter, the bikes are away, mostly, and now they're skiing. Cross country, snowshoeing, downhill, touring, all the sorts of things you could do. It's the most active town that you can find. And I think if you are those, I don't think that's totally exclusive. I know people who don't do any of these things and they love Rossland. But you've got to have an outgoing approach. If you're a reclusive sort of person, there's not a lot of point of being in Rossland, really. By all means, I welcome you, but...
Yes. And Doreen?
Well, I think Dave has actually hit it on the head, but what I like most when we were bringing up our family, who are now, one's about to be 50 and the other's 52, was knowing what they were all about. If you didn't know what was going on, you can bet your sweet life somebody would be able to let you know what was happening.
Everybody looking after everybody.
Yes,
Yeah.
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 And they're still the same.
And the freedom that they had
Yeah.
to put their packs on. They earned money for clearing brush up at the mountain. They found treasures under the lift when they were brush clearing. A whole group of them sometimes would go with packs full of food or whatever, go up in the mountains and come back when they ran out of food. They'd go, I can remember Greg going into one of the old cabins on the mountain, and when they came down with Peter Bosinger and Robbie and the rest of the crew, as we used to call them, the little horrors. Hey, we found some stuff in that cabin. We didn't know whether to drink it or smoke it. You know?
That's great. That hasn't changed.
They didn't have to. Nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed. I want to thank you guys, and hopefully we get a chance to do this again, because we could go on for hours. I know, I know we could.
Absolutely.
And hopefully you don't mind if we use these tapes or recordings to go onto the museum site. People can hear some of these stories. Would that be okay with you guys?
Oh,
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Without